Are there any ministerial papers? Are there any ministerial statements? I call the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I advise that we have 5,583 new cases and 4,039 positive RATs. Tragically, there have been 5 deaths, 1 in aged care, and I know that all members of this House would pass on our condolences to the families of the deceased. We have 380 people in hospital and 30 in ICU. 11 are currently ventilated, Mr Speaker, and as we know, these numbers are coming down as we come off the wave. Our vaccine coverage, which is great news, 92.54% of Queenslanders have had their first dose and 90.61% have had their second dose. In terms of boosters, 63.11% of eligible population have received their boosters, and our 5 to 11-year-olds, 42.11%. Mr Speaker, when the story of this pandemic is written, it will show that no one completely escaped the impacts of COVID. But it will show some places fared better than most, and one of these places is right here in Queensland. Mr Speaker, the reason is clear. The vast majority of our state was vaccinated before COVID arrived. The credit for this belongs to every single Queenslander, but I'm proud that our government did everything possible to ensure our people were protected. We travelled the length and breadth of this state. We put vaccine hubs in schools, Bunnings and caravan shows. Our health workers went door to door in places where vaccine numbers were too low. When New South Wales confronted its outbreak, only 4% of its population was vaccinated. That ended in months of lockdowns and billions of dollars worth of lost business. But when COVID came to Queensland, 80% of Queenslanders were fully vaccinated. The data shows our decision to delay the start of school was absolutely the right one. The numbers of children infected is currently lower than the peak in mid-January. The number of teaching, health and emergency services staff infected is falling too. We are cautiously optimistic the number of hospitalisations and infections have peaked, which is why today I can make this announcement. Mr Speaker, from 6 p.m. Friday, the 4th of March, masks will no longer be required in most settings. You won't need them at work or in school or at the shops. Staff and patrons won't be required to wear them at cafes, pubs and restaurants. Mr Speaker, smiles are back. We can put our masks away. They'll still be needed on public transport, airports, in hospitals, disability care, prisons and aged care. If you feel vulnerable, you should wear one. If you want to wear one, you can. We are scrapping density limits that apply to weddings and funerals and the number of people you can have in your own home. There will be no density limits in food courts, hairdressers, gyms, private venue hire and universities. In addition, bans on excursions, assemblies and visitors to schools will go as of March the 4th. As these restrictions ease, parents who are yet to have their children vaccinated might want to consider bringing those vaccinations forward. Mr Speaker, this is all about getting our lives back to a new normal. Normal does not include a televised daily COVID update. We will still publish COVID numbers every day, but from the first week of March, we will only see our Chief Health Officer if needed. Mr Speaker, the story of this pandemic is not yet over, but we hope a brighter chapter awaits. Thank you, Queensland. Mr Speaker, investing in public transport is a hallmark of good Labor governments. Today I can announce we'll invest $1.12 billion to deliver faster rail services between Brisbane, Logan and the Gold Coast. Through this great project, we will remove 5 level crossings, upgrade 9 stations, lay more tracks, effectively doubling the track between Currabee and Beenleigh, and will increase the frequency of services throughout SEQ. Complementing the great work we're doing on Cross River Rail, Queensland's largest ever infrastructure project. Mr Speaker, this means more express services will run more often between Brisbane, Logan and the Gold Coast. We believe this project will ease congestion and could shave up to 4 minutes off the average train trip between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. And it was great to hear Robert Dowell on ABC Radio this morning, who described today's announcement as a very timely and worthwhile project. Mr Speaker, getting Queenslanders home quicker is important, but this project is also about planning for the future. This is our first investment in transport infrastructure in preparation for the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Mr Speaker, preparing for an Olympic Games is a marathon, not a sprint. It is important that we get out of the blocks strongly. Faster rail will help us do that. Mr Speaker, more people than ever before are realising what we've known for a long time, that Queensland is the place to be. In the 12 months to June 2021, more than 30,000 people moved to Queensland from the southern states. You can't blame them, can you? The vast majority of these people are settling in south-east, but a lot of people are going into regional parts of our state as well. And we expect this to continue with an extra 1.2 million people living in the region by 2036. Faster rail will create around 900 jobs and will ensure Queensland remains on track to deliver the best Olympic Games of all time. Mr Speaker, we're committed to delivering faster rail for the people of Queensland. I want the Prime Minister on board as well. I've always said we'll work best when we work together. That's why today I'm also calling on the federal government to match our $1.12 billion commitment for faster rail services. Mr Speaker, thanks to our strong health response, our economic recovery is full steam ahead. Since the beginning of this pandemic, we've created 124,300 jobs, the strongest jobs growth in the nation. And our overseas exports have rebounded by 26.3%, totalling $79.2 billion in 2021. But on this side of the House, we understand that to keep pace with strong population growth, we must invest now. Our government will always invest in new infrastructure to create jobs and get people home faster. And I'll always fight for Queensland's fair share. Mr Speaker, after almost 2 years, Australia's Welcome Mat is once again rolled out to the world. Our international borders have now reopened to vaccinated tourists and travellers. Watching the images of our airports humming with people again yesterday brings so much hope and optimism that we are finally coming out the other side of this global pandemic. Brisbane International Airport saw 1,500 guests alone come through the terminal yesterday. This is incredible news for our tourism industry, who have been one of the hardest-hit industries throughout the past 2 years. And I'm advised that we are already seeing increases in booking activity for airlines and hotels, which is great news. Since the onset of COVID-19, our government has stood shoulder to shoulder with the tourism industry. I've seen firsthand how COVID affected our tourism businesses, which have been incredibly hard for some, particularly those reliant on the international market, especially in the far north, the Whitsundays and the Gold Coast. That's why we committed $1.1 billion in economic recovery and support for the tourism, events and hospitality sectors across the state, with a key focus on those regions. Mr Speaker, that support is continuing. Most recently, I was on the Gold Coast just this month to announce that our government will be partnering with the state's 4 largest airports in a nation-leading deal that will see a joint $200 million investment to secure more direct international flights to Queensland. This deal is predicted to deliver more than 5.3 million airline seats per year and generate almost $4 billion. In addition, whilst in Bundaberg visiting the region's iconic tourism experience at Monrepo Turtle Centre with the Tourism Minister and the member for Bundaberg, I announced a series of new campaigns worth $5.2 million targeting national and international tourists. That includes the second phase of the Great Queensland Getaway campaign, which features once-in-lifetime prizes, holiday deals and cut-price airlines. I know we will see visitor numbers to this great state continue to increase as a result. Our tourism industry is the lifeblood of this state and will continue to be there for them as we recover. Mr Speaker, our investment in infrastructure is only part of our Olympic preparation. We're also investing in our people. Perhaps our biggest motivation for securing the Games is to bring the dream of competing in them within reach. Starting in April, we will launch the biggest talent search Australia has ever seen. Coaches will travel the length and breadth of Queensland searching for 50,000 young athletes. Today's 10-year-old is 2032's Olympian or Paralympian. Coaches and talent scouts will work with them to see who has the physical and mental strength to go for gold. Eventually they will join the Queensland Academy of Sport, whose funding has been doubled to $29.3 million. It includes a $9.8 million state-of-the-art sports science centre, which I'm proud to say accommodates both Olympians and Paralympians. Our Youth for 2032 program aims to make the best even better. Our secret weapon is Miss Chelsea Waugh, architect of Great Britain's transformation which turned its athletes into world beaters. Mr Speaker, as I say as often as possible, if Queensland was a country, we would have finished 7th in the medal count in Tokyo. In Beijing, Jakara Anthony from tropical Cairns won gold at the Women's Moguls, having perfected her moves at the Jeff Henke Olympic Winter Training Facility at Chandler. Jacqueline Narracott won silver in the skeleton, Australia's first ever medal in an event of this type. If that's what we can do without snow, imagine what we will achieve in 2032. Mr Speaker, last week I announced a wide-ranging review into the culture and accountability of the state's public sector. It covers 6 key areas, including the culture of the public service, ensuring ethical decision-making and impartial advice, the nature of interactions between integrity bodies, the public service and the executive, legislation underpinning the existing ethics and integrity framework, adequacy of systems, ethics training and the timeliness of processes to resolve ethical and integrity complaints. It will be conducted by Professor Peter Coldrake, AO. Professor Coldrake was for 14 years Vice-Chancellor of the Queensland University of Technology. He is currently Chief Commissioner of the federal government's appointed Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency. He had previously been appointed by the then LNP government to conduct the 2013 Open Government Policy Forum and the strategic review of the functions of the Office of the Integrity Commissioner. Professor Coldrake is a fitting person to conduct the review I announced on Friday. Mr Speaker, I believe such a review is healthy and timely. Professor Coldrake has a very wide terms of reference and the ability to make whatever recommendation he sees fit. I will receive an interim report in 2 months and a final report in 4 months. Both will be made public and all recommendations will be adopted in full. Mr Speaker, there are other issues that have been raised in relation to the Integrity Commissioner and the former State Archivist. There are limits on what I can say about those matters. In this state, we follow the rules. We don't comment on court cases before they're finalised.
That's right.
Likewise, I'm not free to comment on matters
Order. Order. The Premier has the call.
Likewise, I'm not free to comment on matters currently under investigation by the proper authorities. Since the Fitzgerald inquiry—
Order.
Since the Fitzgerald inquiry, Queensland has had robust institutions to guard against corruption. One is the CCC. It is a standing royal commission in this state. The other is our parliamentary committees.
Members, I would like to hear the ministerial statement. The Premier has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. These committees are bipartisan and they do good work, most notably recently to do with voluntary assisted dying and an investigation into serious allegations surrounding Logan Council. They are constantly privy to confidential information. It is simply not fair to discuss publicly matters before a committee before they are fully considered.
That's right.
Mr Speaker, it is incumbent on us as members of parliament to defend these institutions. Undermining and destroying them does not lead to greater transparency and accountability. It leads to less.
Order. Member for Everton. Members are reminded that comments will be directed through the chair. Premier, you have the call.
Mr Speaker, let me quote. There were errors in policy and political judgment, such as changes to government committees. The institutions of state must be respected, and corruption and lack of accountability will not be tolerated. That ought to be familiar to those opposite. It's from the Borbidge-Sheldon review into how the LNP lost the 2015 election. Interfering with the CCC, the Supreme Court, truncating estimates hearings from 2 weeks to 2 days, and sacking—
Order.
And sacking the Parliamentary Crime and Corruption Committee in the dead of night.
That's right.
Order, members.
Mr Speaker, voters noticed and they cared. These are not allegations. This is what the LNP does in government, and many of those who did that are still here.
Members to my left, I just want to be clear. Standing orders haven't changed over the break. And I just want to make sure that that statement is made clear to all members of the House. Premier, do you have anything further to add?
I do, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I will conclude with another quote. The demand for my service during my tenure has primarily been due to the government's preparedness to adopt a higher standard of ethics and integrity. It is a credit to you as Premier that the standard which applies to ministers and assistant ministers are of the highest calibre in terms of ethics and integrity. Mr Speaker, it was a letter written to me a month ago. It was signed Nicola Stepanov, Queensland Integrity Commissioner.